Hello everyone, so let us start with today's video, and it is on zoological classification. So zoological classification, you can understand from here that it's going to be all the different phylum and classes of the animal world. Now those who are not zoology students, for them it will be a little bit boring, but I'll try to make it as brief as possible, and I will not go into very much details, just the parts that you need. So moving on with the first thing, we have the symmetry. So the symmetry, as you can understand, is the arrangement of different body parts in an organism and how they are arranged, whether there is any symmetry at all. So here you can understand that there is no such symmetry, that the organs are not uniformly arranged in the body. So therefore it is known as asymmetric. But when they are having a similar kind of arrangement, then we call it symmetrical organisms. Now in those symmetry, we have different types, like bilateral symmetry, which means that if we cut it through one plane, the body will be equally divided into two parts, and the two parts will be just the mirror images of one another. So that way we can call it, it's a bilateral symmetry. What is biradial symmetry? Biradial symmetry is a combination of both bilateral and radial. So for that you need to understand what is radial symmetry. Radial symmetry is anything which can be cut, the body can be cut through any radius. Suppose it's a circle, and in any radius you are cutting and you are getting two equal halves. Exactly similar halves. So that is called a radial symmetry. So biradial symmetry is, it can be either cut into different radius, or it can be cut through one plane giving two equal halves. So this is a combination of both bilateral and biradial and radial symmetry. That is known as biradial symmetry. Similarly, if we consider as tetramerism, which means fourfold symmetry. So there are four, every organ or body part is in 4 in number. So that is known as tetramerism. Pentamerism, like we have seen in starfishes, that is a very common example, that is known as pentamerism. Hexamerism is obviously the 6-fold symmetry, and it is seen in some corals, and octamerism, of course, in 8-fold symmetry. So these kinds of symmetry divisions are there with respect to the number of planes with which it can be cut. Like this is triradial because there are 3 organs arranged like this, and any 3 plane can give 2 equal halves, 2 exactly equal halves. So that means it is triradial. Similar to tetramerism, pentamerism, it will be 4, 5, 6, etc. Those parts are there. So if we consider this, then you can see that this has a radial symmetry because it is a circle in nature, and therefore we can cut it through any radius and it will give 2 equal halves. This is a biradial symmetry because either you can cut it with this plane, which will give you 2 exactly equal halves, that is a bilateral thing, and you can cut it, this is a circle, so you can cut it in any radius giving you radial symmetry also. So therefore it is a combination of both giving biradial symmetry. Spherical symmetry, you can understand, this is just like a ball, and therefore it will give, we can cut it in any equal halves and it will give you a 2 semicircles. So that's called spherical symmetry. Similar is asymmetrical, like I've already discussed, there is no symmetry at all, and bilateral symmetry is just like this. So it's a fish, and these are the important terms, like dorsal is the back portion, ventral is the front portion or our chest portion, anterior is the front side, like this is the anterior, means the face is like this, so this is the anterior, and the posterior is the back side of the organism. So therefore if there is a plane, like if it cuts from from here, then it will be dorsal and ventral, 2 different halves it will give. So this is bilateral. And if you cut it from here, it will give you 2 different halves, the anterior half and the posterior half. But if you cut it like this, like from the from eye it goes like this, then it will be a bilateral symmetry because it will be exactly 2 equal halves. Here also there will be one eye, here also there will be one eye, and all the other parts will be equally divided between the 2 halves. But if you cut it from here, then the anterior part will be different from the posterior part. The dorsal part will be also different from the ventral part. So these will not be considered as bilateral symmetry. Only if the plane goes from the middle of the eye like this, then if you cut the fish into two equal halves, then it will be called as a bilateral symmetry. So same thing is explained here in symmetry. This is an asymmetrical body, and like I have already discussed. Yeah. So I have already discussed there is an irregular shape, so there will be no two equal halves. Spherical symmetry is also when the shape of the body is spherical, there is any axis, and it can be divided into two halves, that any plane that runs through the organism's center. Radial symmetry, like I was saying, that it is of different types: tetramerous, pentamerous, hexamerous, octamerous. So depending on the body shape, body organization, we can easily divide the body into different parts, and therefore when it is 8 equal parts, it is octamerous. When it is 6, it is hexamerous. When it's 5, it's pentamerous. When it's 4, it's tetramerous. So depending on the number of equal parts that you are getting, the symmetry can be named according to that. Biradial symmetry, like I've already said, is a combination of both radial and bilateral symmetry. And bilateral symmetry, like I was saying, that it has been shown like this here. When we cut like this, then we can get two equal, exactly mirror images of each other, those kinds of halves, then we call it a bilateral symmetry. And these terms, like I was saying, it's already there. It's anterior, posterior, dorsal, ventral, and this kind of plane is known as a transverse plane, and that will not be cut the fish into two equal halves. So these are the different types of symmetry. Now another thing is very important over here, the concept of body layers or the tissue layers that are present in our body. So first thing is that when there is there are three terms which are associated with our body layers, like ectoderm, mesoderm and endoderm. So ectoderm is obviously the outer layer, mesoderm is the middle layer, and endoderm is the innermost layer. So when an organism has all these three layers, then we call it a triploblastic organism. And when an organism lacks the mesoderm, then we call it a diploblastic organism. Like here, if you can see, there is an ectoderm, then in between there is a mesoglia, which is not a true mesoderm but a mesoderm-like layer. So, and then it is the endoderm. So these kind of arrangement can be called as diploblastic since it lacks a true mesoderm. So this is the difference between diploblastic and triploblastic. So these are also called germ layers because these are derived from the embryo, and from the embryo when it develops, these three layers give rise to all the different body parts that we have now as an adult. So therefore these are also called embryonic germ layers. And according to these three layers, we can name the animals as diploblastic or triploblastic with the presence or absence of mesoderm. Next comes another very important term which is known as which is known as a coelom. So a coelom is nothing but a body cavity, but such a body cavity which is lined by mesoderm. So like I already said that this is a mesoderm, the middle layer of cells, and therefore when the mesoderm is covering a body cavity, then we call it a coelom. So if you can understand here that the organisms which will lack a body cavity or a coelom will obviously be termed as acoelomate, and those that will have a true coelom, those will be called a coelomate. Like here, the outer layer is the ectoderm, then the dark layer is the mesoderm. Then you have a cavity. This white layer is the body cavity, which is called coelom because it has mesoderm on both its sides. The dark layer is there as in the inner side as well as the outer side. Therefore, it is lined by mesoderm on both the sides. And the inner layer is known as endoderm. So this kind of animal having a body cavity lined by mesoderm on both sides is obviously triploblastic as well as coelomate, a true coelom. And when there is a body cavity without the mesodermal lining on both sides, like you can see, this is the ectoderm, then the mesoderm, then coelom, then no mesoderm on its inner side and directly the endoderm, then it is called a pseudocoelom or a false coelom. So this kind of false coelom like body cavity, these organisms are known as pseudocoelomate organisms, and it will be triploblastic since the presence of mesoderm is there, but it will not have a true coelom. Therefore, it is a pseudocoelomate triploblastic organism. And when there is absence of body cavity at all, therefore there is no cavity at all, the mesoderm is there, the endoderm is there and the ectoderm, no without any body cavity, then we call it an acoelomate organism, although it is triploblastic but it is lacking a coelom, therefore it's acoelomate. So here examples are given of acoelomate, pseudocoelomate and coelomate organism. So this is the basic terms that are involved, like symmetry, coelom, and as well as the mesoderm, the diploblastic, triploblastic thing. These are the basic terms that are needed to understand the classification of animals. So first, like I will always start with the non-chordates. So we have two basic broad division in zoological classification. One is the chordate and one is the non-chordate. So I will talk about the chordates when I move into the chordates, and then you will understand why it is called as chordates and non-chordates. But let us start with non-chordates, and then we will stop with this video at non-chordates and we will start the next video with chordates. So first and foremost, the animal with no true tissue organization. So the first and foremost, the first phylum that is there in zoological classification is the phylum Porifera or the sponges. So the sponges, like I would like to say, if you have seen the cartoon SpongeBob, so there the organism is a sponge actually. So it is a very primitive organism and it is the first phylum in the zoological classification. It is known as phylum Porifera or sponges. So why they are called sponges? So it's very simple, because they have pores in their body which resemble a sponge like this. So it's like a sponge. If you know what is a sponge, it's a sponge with pores in it. So they have a channel system in their body. So these small pores in their body, it allows the water to go inside, and this large pore at the top, it allows the water to come out. So with this water, they exchange all the nutrients, all the gases and the excretory materials. These water exchanges there, and therefore the incoming water washes out all the excretory materials and then comes out through the osculum. So the incoming pores are ostium and the outgoing pore is the osculum. So this is the basic structure of a sponge, and these are some examples given according to the division of classes. There are calcarea, which has spicules. These spicules are there inside the body, which gives it a structure. So these spicules are basically made up of either calcium, therefore it is called as calcareous spicules, or silica, therefore it is known as siliceous spicules. So in Hexactinellida and Demospongi you can find these siliceous spicules, and in calcarea you will find this calcareous spicules. And these are some examples of phylum Porifera. So next, moving on to this phylum, which is the animals with radial symmetry. So these are obviously asymmetrical organisms, like you can understand from the body shape that these organisms are lacking any symmetry. So they are asymmetrical. Now, They do not have any true body organization as well. Now coming to these kinds of organisms, there is a symmetry involved. So like I was saying, these animals are in radial symmetry, and particularly this Ctenophora, phylum Ctenophora, the next phylum in order, this phylum has biradial symmetry. Like I was saying, it has a combination of both bilateral and radial. It can be cut in both ways. And it has the following classification: two classes, Tentaculata and Nuda. So you can understand the one with tentacles is known as class Tentaculata. The ones without tentacles are Nuda. So this is an example, and here if you can see that these organisms comes with comb plates like this. So these comb plates are arranged, and it is usually 8 in number, and it is arranged like this. So these green colored things are comb plates. So they are just like combs, like our hair combs, and it is there in the organism to give it a proper shape. And it has statocyst, which is a balancing organ, and therefore these are aquatic organisms. It is very much understood, and they are also known as comb jellies because of the presence of comb plates. Next comes the Cnidaria. So Cnidaria, there are several classes, and what are actually Cnidaria? If you can see here, a very common member of class Cnidaria is jellyfish. We are all aware of what a jellyfish is, and sea anemones, and these are all examples of class phylum Cnidaria. And these are the classes of phylum Cnidaria. And if you can see here that these are diploblastic animals, that means they have only ectoderm and endoderm and no true mesoderm. So they are diploblastic animals. So class Hydrozoa, they are usually colonial or solitary, and polyp is the stationary form, and medusa is the floating form. Like these jellyfishes, they are medusa. But these sea anemones, when it is stationary at a particular place, it is stuck, then it is called a polyp form. So polyp and medusa are two very common forms of this class phylum Cnidaria, and accordingly they are being classified into the following classes. And there are a few examples written here, so you can go through them. And next we coming to the triploblastic animals. So far we have only seen diploblastic animals and asymmetrical, then it comes biradial. In Cnidaria we have some bilateral symmetry, like these animals are bilaterally symmetrical also. But next comes the triploblastic animals with bilateral symmetry. First and foremost, in triploblastic we have the acoelomates, which are platyhelminthes or the flatworms. So if you see here, these are the flatworms, and there are different types. Like we have the tapeworms, which are very commonly known parasites are there. And these are some examples in the platyhelminthes. So platyhelminthes, helminth means worm, and platy comes from flattened. So they are basically flatworms of different types. And they are pseudocoelomates. That means they lack they are acoelomates. That means they lack a coelom. Next comes the pseudocoelomates, the phylum Nematoda and phylum Rotifera. So nematodes are basically roundworms. So far we have seen the flatworms, and now comes the roundworms. Like their body is round like this. So there are two classes, Phasmida and Aphasmida, according to the presence of phasmids, and therefore there are a few examples written here. And if you see here, there is the ectoderm, there is the mesoderm like thing, but it is not mesoderm. It's actually written wrong, no, actually this is the mesoderm and this is the endoderm, and this white thing is the pseudocoelom. Why? Because it has mesoderm only on one side and not the other side. The other side there is endoderm. So therefore it is not a true coelom, like I had already discussed. It's a pseudocoelom, and these animals are triploblastic but pseudocoelomates. Next comes the rotifers. So the rotifers, they are also called the wheel animals because they have a tuft of ciliated hair like thing around their mouth, and when they move very rapidly, it looks like the two wheels are running in front of their mouth. So therefore it is also called, they are also called wheel animals, and they are mostly common in fresh water and also in salt water. These are the classes, and these are some examples of rotifers. So they are commonly known as wheel animals. So now we have completed the discussion of pseudocoelomates and acoelomates in triploblastic animals with bilateral symmetry. Next, coming to the coelomates. Then so the coelomates start from annelids. So annelids are basically segmented worms. So far we have seen flatworms without any segmentation. Then comes roundworms without any segmentation, and next comes annelids, which are known as segmented worms. So in segmented worms, like earthworm is a very common example, and if you see earthworms, there will be certain segments which are separated by walls or septa. Now what is this segmentation called? This is called metameric segmentation. It is a very common characteristic of the characteristic feature of phylum Annelids. They can be identified easily with this presence of metameric segmentation. So metameric segmentation is nothing but the repetition of organs at regular intervals along the body, and it is divided into similar parts or segments. These parts, each segments, are called metameres. And this segmentation is known as metameric segmentation. So from head to tail end, you can see there are a number of segments, and these segments contain some organs or tissues which are repeated. Like this segment 5 will have some organs, and segment 10 will also have the same organ. So they are repeated as a pattern, and these segments are therefore called metameres. So this segmentation is not only external but also internal. There is an internal wall between each segment called septum, and these segments are repeated linearly along the length of the body. So this kind of segmentation is called metameric segmentation, and it is a striking feature of this phylum Annelida. So next comes phylum Onychophora. So we are done with phylum Annelida. This Onychophora, they are known as velvet worms. So Onychophora basically is a transition between these annelids to arthropods. So they are there are several characters which resemble annelids and several characters which resemble arthropods. So it's like a link. It's a transition between these two phyla. And if you look closely, they have a velvety like external appearance. So this is different from whatever worms we have seen. So these are called velvet worms. So flatworms, roundworms, segmented worms, and now comes velvet worms. So phylum Onychophora consists of all these velvet worms. Next, there is another small phyla which is called as tardigrada, or the organisms are called tardigrades, and they resemble bears. So if you can see here, they look like little bears walking on their claws, and therefore they are known as water bears or moss piglets. So these tardigrades, they have a striking feature, like their legs consist of claws, and they walk on their claws in the water, and they have a very thick cuticle, and they are resistant to extreme conditions. Therefore these like you can see, when the tardigrade is in active state, it looks like this, but when it is in dry, extreme environmental conditions, it is resistant to physical extremes, but its shape and form changes. So it means that the tardigrade is in an anhydrous state, water deficient state, and it starts looking like this. So therefore they are very organisms which can resist very extreme conditions, and they are surviving those conditions, and they do not easily die. So this phylum is known as phylum Tardigrada. Now coming to the most diverse phylum, and the phylum with the largest number of organisms present, that phylum is known as phylum Arthropoda. So it consists of anything from crabs to prawns to the scorpions to spiders to cockroaches and insects and everything. So this phylum Arthropoda is very important because it is the largest phylum in the animal world. And therefore, phylum Arthropoda, the basic characteristics which distinguish that it is an arthropod, it's known as the first one is jointed appendages, which means that the legs, they are jointed. You can see different segments have joined together and they form a leg. So they are known as jointed appendages. And segmented body. The body is divided into head, thorax and abdomen. And the external skeleton is thick cuticle. So if you can see here, this is the structure of a cockroach and this is the head, this is the thorax. It's a prothorax, mesothorax and metathorax. Thorax is also divided into 3 parts, and then it comes the abdomen, which is also segmented, but this segmentation is not metameric. It's a normal external segmentation, but it does not usually separate it internally and it does not have repetition of organs, nothing like that. So this is a normal segmentation, not a metameric segmentation. And it has 2 pairs of wings also. So all these are features of a common arthropod or an insect. And there are few subphylum like Uniramia, Chelicerata, Trilobita, Crustacea. In Crustacea, you will find the crabs, the shrimps, and in Chelicerata, you will find the spiders, the ticks, and the scorpions and all that. And in Uniramia, you will find the insects, the moths, beetles, and centipedes, millipedes, all those things. Trilobita is almost the king crab. So those are trilobites. And these are again a few more examples of the different classes and subphylum. And next that we have are the different examples, like in phylum trilobites, there are this horseshoe crabs, and in Chelicerata there are this arachnids, spiders, scorpions. In Mandibulata, the presence of mandibles like the jaws. We have the centipedes, millipedes and insects. So there are a few common things that you have to remember. These are Coleoptera or beetles, Hymenoptera or bees, wasps and ants, the social insects like we call them. Isoptera, termites. The Lepidoptera are moths and butterflies. The Hemiptera are bugs. Diptera are flies. And Crustacea, you have the crabs, shrimps, lobsters and decapods. The Branchiopod, you have the brine shrimp, and then you have the barnacles, copepods and ostracods. So these all included in the phylum Arthropoda. So you don't have to know in details, but you just have to remember which animals belong to which phyla. And next, coming to the very interesting phylum, which is mollusks, because they have a diverse array of animals. So if you see the mollusca, phylum mollusca ranges from here, like there are Polyplacophora, these are chitin, gastropoda, these are snails like we usually call them, the slugs, these are all gastropods because their stomach lies just above their feet. So they are called gastropod. Gastro means stomach, pod means food. And bivalvia because they are like this, the clams. In Bengali we call it chinook. So the clams are there, the mussels, the scallops, these are also edible and they are falling under class bivalvia. So there are 2 valves like this. And then Scaphopoda and Cephalopoda. Cephalo means again brain and pod means foot. So therefore the brain above foot, like octopus, squids, these are falling under class Cephalopoda. And this is the general structure of how a snail looks from inside. So the mouth starts from here, it goes like this, the stomach is there, then have the intestine and anus is also coming out like this. So this is a normal common snail falling under gastropod. So these are different kinds of mollusks which we find in nature, and starting from the slugs and all which do not have any shells, octopus, like they do not have shells, and ranging towards all these organisms which has a shell, like snakes. Next and the last phylum of non-chordates, it's called the echinodermata. So in echinoderms, like the name suggests itself, like echinus means in spine and derma is skin. So echinoderms means the spiny skinned animals. So here if you see that the different classes are here, and from feather stars, sea lilies, brittle stars, sea stars, the starfishes, sea urchins and sea cucumbers, these are all coming under echinoderms, and the main characteristic feature is that they have spiny skin. So with this, our non-chordate part of zoological classification ends here, and therefore we will move on to the chordates in the next video. Thank you.